I discovered something unsettling during my time in Ireland, something that challenged my understanding of democratic norms and press freedom in the global north. First, I came to learn that Irish American authorities had perpetrated what can only be described as transnational repression across both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Second, I found myself on the receiving end of this systematic ill treatment. As, re- as a result, I sought intervention from media outlets that purported to expose state wrongdoing. What followed was a journey through institutional silence that had felt very familiar to anyone who lived through the McCarthy era of the 1950s. I'm Kiana Canada, and this is Mimicking McCarthyism, an examination of an obstruction of justice, uncovering a new iteration of the McCarthyism in Belfast and how it silences stories of state sponsored Black American oppression on the island. In the Republic of Ireland, my outreach commenced with what seemed like promising avenues. The Journal, one of Ireland's largest native online news outlets, received my inquiry first. When they declined to publish my piece, I approached the Dublin Inquirer, a publication known for its coverage of the state's ill treatment of asylum seekers. Both organizations engaged in what I can only characterize as an elaborate exercise in signposting, directing me elsewhere while refusing to investigate the substance of my claims. The Irish Times, despite maintaining dedicated columns addressing migrant and asylum seeker concerns, in the same way declined to engage. The pattern raised fundamental questions. Why? These publications were not fringe publications operating on shoestring budgets. The Dublin Inquirer has established credibility covering precisely the demographic intersections relevant to my situation. The Irish Times had published extensive reportage on immigration experiences and systemic challenges faced by newcomers. Yet, when confronted with allegations of state crimes, these institutions collectively retreated into bureaucratic deflection. Irish American state sponsored intimidation would compel my relocation to Northern Ireland, here. It gave me relief to discover my accommodation was situated directly across from the BBC. There, I disclosed to a journalist that substantial evidence suggested I was being subjected to political repression linked to articles I had authored for The Jurist, a legal news commentary platform. However, that journalist declined to publish my piece. I approached another, and then another, and that relief would soon evaporate. The pattern solidified into something more ominous than mere editorial disinterest. It suggested either institutional instruction to suppress the narrative or collective assessment that I lacked sufficient storygenic qualities to warrant coverage. RTE, which often leans toward progressive coverage, never responded to my inquiries, despite my visiting their studio on multiple occasions. Even when I changed my strategies, sending multiple publications across both jurisdictions, offers for me to author the column myself, which removed burden on their staff, silence remained the universal response. I established a Medium account and began publishing there. Almost immediately, engagement metrics revealed anomalies. Content appeared to be subjected to throttling, a practice whereby platforms algorithmically restrict visibility without explicit notification. comments, shares, and engagement indicators disappeared or failed to materialize in patterns inconsistent with organic reach. Someone wielding substantial institutional power appeared to be orchestrating systematic suppression. A reasonable and prudent person examining these circumstances holistically would conclude that coordinated interference was occurring. The alternative, that content addressing political repression, surveillance, and transnational overreach, simply failed to resonate with any audience, defied statistical probability given the demonstrated public interest in such topics. I ceased publishing analytical pieces and confined my output to public statements. What if I transferred my content to another platform? I migrated my content to Substack. The identical suppression patterns manifested there and persist to this very day. No engagement. The same phenomenon extended to Facebook. No engagement there. The last authentic, measurable engagement with my work occurred in 2022, when I maintained a LinkedIn presence and contributed to the Jurist. For nearly 4 years, some modern iteration of a McCarthyist operative embedded within an intelligence apparatus had been shadowing my content across multiple platforms. Shadow banning, also termed stealth banning, constitutes the practice of blocking or partially restricting a user's content visibility without notification. The mechanism differs fundamentally from outright suspension. A shadow ban user can post, interact, and observe their content as if functioning normally, yet that content remains invisible or substantially deprioritized for other users. Throttling operates in the same way, algorithmically limiting reach and suppression hashtag visibility. The fact that my social media accounts appear in search results and remain technically accessible does not demonstrate genuine accessibility. Shadow banning operates precisely through this ambiguity. Content exists in a digital purgatory, visible to the creator yet hidden from broader audiences. Platform algorithms can selectively suppress content from appearing in a follower's feeds, exclude posts from hashtag searches, and remove accounts from recommendation engines while maintaining the facade of normal operation. I acknowledge readily that my content does not represent advanced social media production. I also recognize a substantial room for improvement in my understanding of platform dynamics and audience engagement strategies. With no funds at my disposal, I understand that my videos lack the production quality that attracts organic viral distribution. But these limitations do not in themselves demonstrate an absence of interference. A reasonable and prudent person would note that complete absence of engagement across multiple platforms following previous periods of documented interaction suggests external suppression rather than content quality alone. Black American activists, particularly those engaged in progressive and socialist organizing, have documented extensive experiences of shadow banning and algorithmic suppression. During the resurgence of Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, creators reported dramatic engagement drops, content removals, and hashtag suppression, specifically affecting posts about systemic racism, police violence, and extrajudicial executions. Research has documented repeated instances of shadow banning against Black users, pointing to algorithmic biases embedded in these systems. These patterns establish precedent that platforms do engage in active suppression of political speech, particularly speech challenging state power or institutional racism. Could this constitute McCarthyist censorship? And if so, is there evidence of it happening in Belfast? Between 2011 and 2024, the Police Service of Northern Ireland conducted 21 unlawful covert operations attempting to unmask journalist sources. 8 journalists were subjected to illegal surveillance. Of the 8, 2 documentary filmmakers investigating state collusion in a massacre had their phones monitored, offices raided, and equipment seized. Did the PSNI or some intelligence agency connected to it, like NISOs, understand how to manipulate the press apparatus like McCarthy? McCarthy grasped what reporters craved: front page placement. He instructed them what to write and what to admit. McCarthy dispatched investigators to excavate compromising material on journalists covering him critically, including Phil Potter of the Baltimore Sun, whom he threatened with subpoenas on multiple occasions without following through. McCarthy memorized newspaper deadlines, both late-night cutoffs for morning editions and late-morning deadlines for afternoon papers. He deliberately released inflammatory accusations minute before these deadlines, ensuring reporters had insufficient time to verify his claims or solicit alternative perspectives. This allowed McCarthy's allegations to dominate front pages, while rebuttals, if they ever materialized, appeared days later buried in back sections. Was someone replicating this methodology in the Irelands? Bradley Hale, Donald Herlihy, Maurice O'Sullivan, the old man in the Macleay Library? Were they connected somehow to NISOs or the PSNI? Was this operational logic behind the Belfast Telegraph publishing a photograph labeling me an anti-immigrant protester, despite the years I had advocated for asylum seekers? The mischaracterization appeared without opportunity for correction or context, replicating McCarthy's strategy of allegation without accountability. Were intelligence officers or cooperative journalists in Belfast being deployed to collect compromise on media figures? Should they dare publish accounts of Global North's perpetration of transnational repression against its own citizens? McCarthy consistently sought what Larry Tye characterizes as, quote, perpetual coverage with practically no perspective, end quote. He generated accusations with such velocity that debunking one claim became irrelevant. A fresh scandal had already captured headlines. The architect of my persecution would necessarily continue operating behind institutional veils, yet perhaps patterns offered clues. The Belfast community elements that appeared coordinated against me shared a singular characteristic: their disdain for or explicit rejection of far-right ideologies. As a Black American socialist, minority communities, diaspora populations, and fellow socialists in Belfast organically represented my natural allies. Takura, Makoni, Patrick Corrigan, and Ivanka Antova, all leading organizations that helped asylum seekers in some capacity, showed blatant indifference to my concerns, participated in anti-Black American or anti-Semitic conduct. As a result, they likely advanced within the Irish media for doing so. But Makoni is right. Northern Ireland can be a difficult place for some migrants to feel at home. He captures this reality in his own words, quote, depending on how you look and how you're perceived, that is where the migrant issues comes in, end quote. His observation speaks to a deeper truth, that identity in Northern Ireland is often negotiated not through self-definition, but through the gaze of others. One cannot deny that when Takura learned that I was an American who had a complicated relationship with the Muslim community, he didn't seek to bridge our differences. Instead, he appeared to reinforce them, shaped both how I looked and how he perceived me. Makoni has publicly stated, quote, "When you see injustice, stand up for that person," end quote. Yet for 2 years, he stood on the sidelines as I faced injustice in Belfast, watching and instigating, but never intervening. This is despite me advocating for Makoni when, one, graffiti messages in Northern Ireland pushed him out of his home, and two, my replenishing the room with commentary when his inquiries at the Let's Not Talk About Racism symposium at Queen's University, Belfast, were met with silence. When I visited Aksani's office, there were portraits of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X hung prominently on the walls. Two black figures who I suspect would be turning over in their graves if they knew that Makoni made use of a coin-to-hell practice to silence my voice in Belfast. While extraordinary effort had been expended operating continuously and systematically to ensure these communities would not align with me, it did not take much effort for them to say no. But to what end? Who benefits from my isolation? Is there an evidentiary trail connecting this apparatus to each organization and demographic group? This trail obviously exists. Now, the question is, what Irish American firm is on the other end?